Accepted contracts in Las Vegas just had their best April in years, 14% higher than the same month last year, 4 consecutive months of growth heading into the strongest part of the selling season. And yet median prices are down, days on market are up, and most people watching the market had no idea that these two realities can exist in the same market at the same time. That gap between what the data actually shows and what people think it shows is exactly where sellers get hurt. They wait when they should move, they overprice because they read one headline, they accept a weak offer because nobody told them one specific submarket in this valley is technically in seller's territory right now. Now, by the end of this video, you will know more about the actual state of this market than most people, and even some agents for that matter. I'm Justin Bevins. Let's get into it. Oh, and one more thing before we get into the charts. There is a number towards the end of this video that tells you exactly how much time a seller has before a listing starts working against them. Most people have never heard it framed this way, so stay through chart 12. It's worth it. So let's start with what homes are actually selling for. April 2026 median across the entire MLS is 435,000. That's down about 1.1% from 440,000 in April of 2025, 439,999. Now that's an $8,000 decline, and before anyone panics, let's have some context. The 5-year peak for this market was 445,000 in May of 2022. That's over here, okay? 445,000. That's at the absolute top of the pandemic frenzy. Now today we are approximately $10,000 off that peak 3 years later. Now that is not a collapse. That's a market that ran up extremely fast, stopped, and is actually holding up pretty well even since then. Now let's talk about the submarket split. This is where it gets useful. So let me open up a couple of other tabs here. You can see what Henderson's doing. It's at 474,000, down 3.3% or 4% below or year over year. Las Vegas proper is at 435,000. You can see that line as it just came into the graph. That's down 2.2%. They're both heading in the same direction, both giving back a little bit. But North Las Vegas went the other way. If you look at North Las Vegas here, it's up 2.4%. And that's a big jump, sitting at $425,000. So North Las Vegas is really where the story is happening right now. And while the rest of the valley softens slightly, North Las Vegas is gaining, in part because it's the most affordable part of the valley right now. So we're seeing a lot of activity there versus some of the other places. Now for everyone else, the practical read is this. Buyers have a little bit more leverage than they did 2 years ago. A little, not a lot. Sellers who price accurately are still transacting well, and sellers who priced for 2022 are sitting. And we'll get to exactly why that matters when we hit the days on market graph here in a minute. Now, average sales price and median sales price tell different stories. And in this market, the difference is worth understanding. April 2026 average for the entire MLS is 554,838. Let's clear out these lines so you can see that. All right, that's the entire MLS, 554,838. That's up 1.3% over last year. Las Vegas proper came in at 547,503. That's down 2.4% versus last year. And North Las Vegas is at 437,537. You can see the green line right here. Okay. Henderson is at 688,770. That's a big number for Henderson on the average side. Hold on to that for just a second, because that average at 689, approximately 689, the median we just saw was 474,000. That's a $215,000 gap between those two figures, the median and the average. And what creates that gap is upper end sales. I've talked about this before in other market reports. A handful of high-priced transactions pull the mean or the average significantly higher, while the typical transaction, what most buyers and sellers are actually doing, sits much closer to that $474,000 median. But Henderson luxury listings have really been on a roll lately, and that's why that average looks so good in Henderson right now. Supply and demand drive price and activity in every market. So let's talk about new listings and total number of homes for sale. All right, new listings in April 2026, 5,119 across the entire MLS. Now, April 2025 was just 5,327 if we go back a year here, all right? So that's down about 3.9% year over year. If you look at this number right here, that's the year over year, 3.9%. Fewer sellers entered the market this spring than last spring. Now look at the seasonal ramp up as well. January 2026 was 4,796 new listings. All right, by April, it's just over 5,000, 5,119. Normal seasonal pattern running steady. There's no flood of supply dumping into the market all at once, just slight increases each month. And you can actually see in March, we were down a bit as far as new listings, only 4,438. A lot of sellers were hesitant to put their homes on the market, all right? Now, if you're thinking about listing and hesitating because you assume the market is really crowded, this data says otherwise. The seller pool is actually smaller than it was last year. Again, 5,119 this year, last April, 5,327. That's the new listings for April of last year versus this year. But when we get into the actual homes for sale, that number is actually a little bit lower this year than it was last year. So let's start on that next. That's active inventory or homes for sale. It's everything that buyers are choosing from on the market right now. In April in 2026, we're just about 11,100 homes for sale across the entire MLS. And if you look at the 5-year, and this is a 5-year chart, it tells a more complete story. February 2022 is the floor, which is around right here, okay? 5,014 homes. Then inventory spiked really hard through the back half of that year, peaked near 14,000, 13,855 in September of 2022. And it's been working its way lower ever since, down to these levels here, 7,000, 8,000 for the entire MLS. And now it's come back up a little bit. So compare April 2024 to today, and that's right here. That's 7,473 or 7,400 homes on the market. Today there are 11,000. That increase is the primary reason the pricing power has softened relative to those frenzy years just a couple of years ago. More choices for buyers means a seller cannot just list and expect multiple offers over list anymore. Presentation and pricing have to do the real work now for these homes that are on the market. Now, one thing specific to this month, inventory actually pulled back from March to April, dropping about 440 homes across the MLS. Spring is normally when active listings climb. The fact that it has dipped tells you that buyers absorb that supply faster than new listings replaced it. So the pile of homes for sale is not growing as fast as some would have you believe. And again, looking at April 2026 at 11,000 versus April of 2025, 11,611, we're down a little bit compared to last year. So we're actually going into spring with some really healthy numbers and a balanced market. Now let's talk a little bit about pending sales. That's the bright spot in this month's report. Now, pending sales measure what is actually going under contract right now. So what buyers and sellers are agreeing to. Not what is closed, not what is listed, what buyers have decided to buy. It's a forward indicator, and these contracts will become the closed sales in May and June, all right? So these are 30 to 60-day contracts typically. So April 2026 pending sales is 3,266 across the entire MLS. Now, April 2025, back here, was 2,899. So that means we're up 12.7% on pending contracts year over year. That's a huge jump. That's not a single month anomaly either. January was 2,529. February was 2,752. And March was 3,028. April is 3,266. That's 4 consecutive months of growth, accelerating as we enter the peak of the selling season. Now that's great. That's pending sales. That means people are out there writing contracts. Now every headline and YouTube title that says the Las Vegas market is slow has to explain that number, because this would suggest that the market's actually doing pretty well as far as buyer activity. Buyers are signing contracts at a faster pace than they were a year ago. Real buyers on real homes with real money. That is what pending sales measures. Now for sellers, this resolves something that seems confusing on the surface. Prices are flat to slightly soft, and demand is rising at the same time. That is actually a normal condition in a market transitioning from correction back towards equilibrium. Supply is still elevated from 2022 and 2023. Demand is catching up to it. Prices will follow once that gap closes further. And that means a well-priced, well-presented home is moving in this market. The buyers are there. The pending sales prove that. Now, closed sales, if we take a look at that next, that's what completed last month, in the month of April. Contracts that crossed the finish line. So for April 2026, that number was 2843 closings across the entire MLS. April 2025 was about, let's see here, April 2025 was about 2961. So we're down about 4%, you can see right here, versus a year ago in April, okay? So before that number creates concern, 4% down versus last year, put it into context. April 2023, if we go back a ways here, was 2706, right? We are essentially at the same level as we were 2 years ago as far as the number of closed sales. And you may have seen in the headlines, last year was a down year for a number of closed transactions in real estate, and that is true. This year so far, things are shaping up to be, I guess a bit more of a normal year, all right? So more useful than that current number is what comes next. Closed sales is a lagging indicator by 30 to 45 days. So it closes in May, was agreed upon in April. And given that those 3,266 pending contracts from last month, May and June closings should come in stronger than what we are seeing here. The pipeline is healthy. So again, if we're looking at 2,843 closings in April, but right now, pending, there are 3,266 homes under contract. Now, they're not all going to close in April. Some are going to fall out. Some of them are going to roll, or excuse me, they're not all going to close in May. Some are going to fall out. Some are going to roll into June, but that should come in stronger than what we're seeing right now. We should have another strong month of closed sales coming in May and into June as well. The pipeline overall is really healthy. And you can see that Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Henderson are all kind of following the same pattern. So let's get into days on market, or how long it takes to sell a home, all right? April 2026, if we pull out some of these other numbers here, clean up the chart, April 2026 was 45 days on the market for the entire MLS. If we add Henderson back in, 46 days. Las Vegas proper, 46 days, all right? And North Las Vegas is the fastest moving at 41 days on market. So that just means that on average, it takes 41 days to sell a home in North Las Vegas, 47 days for the rest of the MLS, all right? And that kind of jives with what we've been talking about as far as North Las Vegas being a little bit of a hotter market right now. Now, year over year, that's up 6 days from April of 2025 for the whole MLS. And if I strip these out again, kind of go back and take a look at April of last year, 41 days to sell a home. This year, 47 days, all right? And the multi-year April trend tells a clear story. Back in 2022, it was 18 days, all right? 18 days to sell a home on average. That was the frenzy. Every home was flying off the market. 2023 jumped to 49 days as the market shifted. So back here, 49 days on the market. And 2024 was 35 days on the market. So we get over here to April 2024, 35 days on market. And 2025 was 41 days on market, as I already mentioned. All right? 2026 is at 47. That's 3 consecutive years of rising April days on market. The market has been giving buyers more time and more negotiating power with sellers who are motivated to sell quickly. All right? So as the average is 47 days on market, sellers are a little bit more motivated. They're at the low end of the average. They're selling much faster, maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get their home sold. But that means at the other end of the spectrum, we've got homes that are sitting on the market and taking, 50, 60, 70 days to sell, all right? But there is a positive signal in the monthly data for sellers. January, February were both sitting at 57 days, all right? March dropped to 49, so we were up here at 57 days. January and February. March dropped to 49. April came down to 47. So the spring market is creating real acceleration. Homes are moving faster month over month, even as the year over year comparison looks softer. Now here's the part that matters for any seller thinking about their pricing strategy. The average is 47 days. An overpriced listing does not land at 47. It lands at 70, 80, sometimes 90 days, as I just mentioned. And once a listing crosses 60 days on market, something shifts in how buyers perceive it. They start asking, what is wrong with it? And a price reduction at that point does not reset the clock. It just confirms the suspicion that they're having trouble selling the home. There might be something wrong with it, and they've got to drop the price to get rid of it. So it puts sellers in a bad position. The sellers who adjust in week 2 or 3 of the listing actually usually recover pretty well. The sellers who hold out until they are staring at 2 months on market are negotiating from a much weaker position. That's just the nature of buyer psychology and seller psychology. Months of supply is the next thing we're going to talk about, and it's the measure of who has leverage in a negotiation, all right? So what we do on months of supply is we take the active inventory, we divide that by the monthly sales rate, how fast are homes selling. The result tells you how long it would take to sell every home on the market if no new listings came in. Now below 3 months, sellers have the leverage, right? 3 to 5 is more of a balanced market, and above 5 months, homes sitting on the market, buyers definitely have the leverage. That's what we call a seller's market, a balanced market, and a buyer's market. Okay, that's what they mean when they say that. So April 2026 for the entire MLS is 4.3 months supply of homes on the market. Las Vegas proper is at 4.4 months supply. Henderson is at a 3.9 months supply, and North Las Vegas is at a 2.9 months supply. So again, North Las Vegas is the hot market. It's sitting below 3 months of supply, which is technically a seller's market. If you own in North Las Vegas, the leverage picture there is better than most people realize right now. Now, if you live in North Las Vegas and you've been thinking about selling, you might be hearing the headlines for the rest of Las Vegas and think that it's not that great for sellers. But if you're in North Las Vegas, you're actually looking pretty good right now. So some context on the MLS number. Months of supply peaked at 5.2 months in September of 2025. So let me clear these out, and we'll go back to September of 2025. Right there, 5.2 months supply. That's the highest point in this 5-year data set. This is a 5-year chart we're looking at, and you can see that last year that we had the highest amount of inventory. That's where a lot of the bad news came from. You started to see in the headlines and on YouTube that this was turning into a buyer's market, and it's amazing how quickly things can change just in a matter of months. In September, you're kind of getting ready to go into a holiday slump, and again, last year was on record as one of the slowest records for the number of sales in the last several years, okay? So we've come back down from that. The conditions that weighed on sellers most heavily last fall made it difficult to sell a home are actually easing. And if you tried to sell your home last year and you got really frustrated just thinking that it wasn't possible, you should, if your goals are still to get out of your home and get moved, you should reconsider. The spring right now looks pretty good. And we've talked about in some other videos about how this is the perfect time of the year to list your home. Actually, the prime time is from April and through May as far as pricing and activity. And right now you don't have as much competition, and you certainly have a low month supply or a low amount of inventory on the market. Let's talk about percentage of list price. This one tells you how close to asking price sellers are actually getting. Now, one caveat about this is comparing the closed sale price to the most recent list price, which is not necessarily the original list price. So that means if the seller had to make price reductions during the listing period, this percentage of list price is from the last price they were on the market at. If they had to take some price reductions, this number doesn't tell you actually how much they had to reduce their price to get the home sold. This just tells you what kind of concessions they might have made in price from the last price they were listed at. Hopefully that makes sense, all right? So in April 2026, 98.3% for the entire MLS. Henderson is at 98.2%. Las Vegas proper is at 98.3%. And North Las Vegas is at 99.2%. All right, so a year ago in the MLS, the average is 98.5. So sellers getting very slightly less relative to asking price than last spring, but the movement is fractional. It's not much. The average seller is closing right now within 1.8% of their asking price. So, you know, let's say it's a $500,000 home. That's your last list price minus 1.8%. That means you're taking $491,000, a $9,000 price reduction in order to get your home sold on average if you've got a home listed at $500,000. So buyers are not negotiating sellers down dramatically. This is a functioning market. The difference between what sellers are asking and what they are getting is not that large. And again, when you hear people out there saying that the market is crashing or Vegas is turning into a buyer's market, those numbers, that narrative just doesn't hold up with those numbers, okay? So the North Las Vegas number at 99.2% fits everything else we've seen from that market: tighter supply, faster pace, sellers getting closer to asking price anywhere in this data. So price per square foot is the next thing we're going to talk about. And what it does is it kind of strips out the differences in home size. It's the cleanest apples to apples read on value. So for April 2026, for the entire MLS, it was 267 per square foot. All right, Henderson is at 287. Las Vegas proper is at $271 a square foot, and North Las Vegas is at $233 per square foot. So again, North Las Vegas is the value play. It's where homes are most affordable right now, and that's why they're getting more activity in North Las Vegas than anywhere else, okay? So year over year, the MLS average is down a bit, about 2.6% from the $274 a square foot last year. Back in January of 2021, $188 a square foot. The peak was $274 a square foot back in April of 2025. So even after the year-over-year pullback from last year, 274 to 267, we're still near the top of the 5-year range. So sellers who have owned for more than 2 or 3 years have not lost equity in any meaningful way. They're down from the very top of the market, but that's not the same thing as losing ground. If you bought anywhere back here from December 2022 on, you know, after the craziness of the pandemic there, you're doing okay. You know, from 236 a square foot all the way up to 267 a square foot, you've made some money. And if you bought back in, you know, January, you know, anytime prior to, say, April of 2022, you're still up, right? April 2022 was at 267, and right now we're at 267. So at worst, you're even, right? So let's talk about the health of the market overall with something called dollar volume, okay? Total dollar volume, that's hard to say. Total dollar volume of closed sales in April 2026 is about $1.57 billion across the entire MLS. April 2025 was about $1.62 billion. So we're down about 2.6% year over year, okay? $1.5 billion in residential real estate changed hands in Las Vegas in a single month. $1.5 billion. The market that some headlines are calling slow generated $1.57 billion in closed transactions in April alone. There are real signs of moderation or slowing in the data that I've showed you today, but there are also 2,843 homes that sold last month, and presumably happy buyers who started the next chapter of their lives. Both things can be true. The market can be moderating, but at the same time, this market can also be very healthy, which it is. Now, this is the number I mentioned at the start here we're going to talk about next. This one changes how sellers, let me pull up the chart as I preface this, think about their position in the market. And this is called shows depending. Showings depending tells you how many times a home gets shown before a buyer makes an offer. April 2026, the average home got 8.1 showings per contract for the entire MLS. Henderson is at 7.9%. North Las Vegas is at 7.9 showings. North Las Vegas is at 7.9 showings, and Las Vegas proper is at 8.4 showings. Okay. A year ago in the MLS, the average was 7.3. So it now takes about one additional showing to generate a contract compared to the same month last year. All right. Ignore the 11%. That doesn't really help you put it into context. All right. What's important here is it now takes one additional showing to generate a contract compared to last spring. So buyers are looking at more homes before they commit. Now run the math as a seller for just a second. The average home gets shown 8 times before it goes under contract. A listing receiving one showing per week needs about 8 weeks just to accumulate enough buyer interest to generate an offer before negotiations even start. Now that is 2 months of market time on the low end of normal activity. Now a listing getting 2 showings a week is at 4 weeks to an offer. 3 showings a week and you get an offer in 2 to 3 weeks. So showing activity in the first 10 days is not just a vanity metric. It is a direct indicator of whether the price is attracting buyers or filtering them out. A home that gets 3 showings in the first week and no offers is a pricing conversation. A home that gets 0 showings in the first week is a more urgent pricing conversation. It basically means that you're so overpriced that buyers aren't even coming to look at your house, okay? So the sellers who read low early showing activity as a sign to adjust are the ones who end up closing strong. The sellers who interpret it as the market being slow are the ones at 90 days wondering what happened, because we've seen from the charts and the data today that the buyer activity is out there. This market is not slow. This is a normal, balanced market. All right, let's look at one final chart, raw buyer foot traffic, and that's just how many showings per active listing per month. So in April 2026, the entire MLS is at 2.5 showings total, okay? Las Vegas proper would be 2.5 showings. North Las Vegas is 3 showings, and Henderson is 2.5 showings, okay? So like this is a little different than shows depending, all right? Shows depending just is how many showings a property gets until it closes. This is how many shows per listing in general for the month, all right? Year over year, this is up 19% from April of 2025. That means that more buyers are physically touring homes this spring, going and looking at them, than they were last spring. That showing improvement per listing represents real increased activity across the market. So again, if your home's sitting and you're blaming it on a slow market, the market's better this year than it was last year, okay? Now, if your listing is not getting shown, that is not a market problem. The market is sending buyers out there. Something about the listing, either your price, your photos, your presentation, your condition, it's filtering them before they walk through the door. So anyway, that was 12 charts. Here is what they add up to. Prices are flat to slightly soft across most of the valley, with North Las Vegas as the one submarket that is trending up. New supply entering the market is running lighter than last year. Active inventory pulled back in April, which is unusual for spring. Pending sales are up 14% year over year and have grown every month since January. Closed sales are in line with 2023 levels, and the pipeline says May and June come in stronger than April. Okay, days on market are creeping higher year over year, but improved through the spring. Months of supply is balanced for most of the valley and seller favored in North Las Vegas. Buyer foot traffic per listing is higher than it was a year ago. This market is not what the pessimistic headlines say. It is a market where strategy determines outcomes more than timing does. The sellers who will do well price accurately on day one present well, and move when the data says to move. So if you want to talk through what this data means for your specific property, the link to connect with me is below. I will walk you through your neighborhood numbers, what a realistic outcome looks like, and whether now makes sense for your situation. No pressure, no pitch. I'm Justin. I'm just giving you some clarity. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.